What's up, everyone? Welcome to my nice cozy room. Definitely not a green screen back there. So today I'm going to be responding to a comment that someone left on one of my YouTube videos. In fact, the most recent video about an issue I was having with blueprints in Unreal Engine 5.1.1. Now, typically I wouldn't respond to a comment like this on one of my YouTube videos. I mean, I'm definitely a much bigger person than that. But basically, there's a couple of reasons I'm gonna do this, and well, let's just get into it. Okay, so as you can see here, this guy is extremely subtle and doesn't think very highly of himself, I don't think. He does say that he's a full-time developer using C++, and he feels my pain with blueprints. So what we're gonna do quick is I'm just going to read through his comments. I'm going to keep a tally on screen of all of the genius recommendations he gives me to solve the problem, and we'll go from there. Dude, no! Refresh the nodes, for God's sake! Right-click on Event Trigger and refresh nodes. This is why you get default values. You basically didn't plug it in. And always compile before you play. It adds an extra layer of verification and sanity checks. Which I actually do agree with, but we'll get to that in a moment. The system is not broken. It's just the documentation. I can feel your pain. I'm struggling with C++ and I'm a full-time developer. Also, didn't Unreal already have an event, Take Damage? My advice is, create a new event on Take Damage event, and all the variables you need. Compile, hook it up to your code, tell me if it works. And actually there already is an event called Take Damage, but again, we'll get to that in a moment. This issue you have could be because there's already an event with the same name and it has just 2 objects and a float. This is the sane explanation. Did it work? And before I decided I was going to record this video, I did actually reply to him, which is something I try to do all the time anyway, so if you ever have any questions or just want to let me know how bad of a developer I am, definitely leave a comment and I'll get back to you. But of course, making a new event would work. That's not the point though. I am showcasing a bug. Quite. If the event shared the exact same name, it would not allow me to even name it that. Also, no, refreshing the nodes does not work. If it was that simple, this video wouldn't even exist. So if you've been following along, he did provide 4 amazing explanations actually for why this could be happening. And if I was a new developer to Unreal Engine and didn't know what I was doing, I would actually be able to run through these and try to see if they solve my problem. However, I've actually already done all of these. 3 of the 4 are in the previous video. It's always nice when people who leave a comment like this take the time to watch the whole video and sort of understand where you're coming from before leaving the comment. Really appreciated. Also, I said we were going to get back to it. He mentions that you should always compile before you playtest your game, and I 100% agree with that. I don't fault anyone for not noticing that I compile my game before testing because I do a lot of editing in my videos and that part isn't normally visible. But just really quick, we're actually going to take a run through and look at how many times I compiled my last project just during the portion that I was recording there. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're in the engine, and we're going to go ahead and test out those 4 solutions that were provided to me, starting with number 1, the implied solution of don't be dumb. I'm actually not sure if I can do that, but I'm going to take my best shot at it. Just one moment here. Okay, I'm not really sure if this is going to work. Maybe tackling the problem from a different perspective will give me a better sight of it. So here we've got the event take, ow, this really hurts my eyes, jeez. Okay, so here we've got the event take damage, and you can see here that it's in the same state that it was when I ended the previous recording, where I've removed that extra variable. The engine has been closed, and if we check up here, you can see that it has been compiled, as it compiles itself when the engine is opened. So we're gonna go ahead and test number 2 and number 3 as well right away, which if I take a look over here, says always refresh your notes and always compile before you play. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come down here to the take damage event. I'm going to add a new variable of type float, and we're gonna call this knockback. I'm gonna drop that down after compiling, always compile. I'm gonna drop this down here, and I'm going to set the default value to 250. And the thing that I find so troubling about this, and the reason I'm pretty sure the fourth thing isn't the problem, as well as the other reason we're going to get into in a moment, the reason I don't think that's the problem is because here in the combat character, this is the base class where all of the combat functionality happens. This doesn't fire properly, right? So I'm going to drop in a print string here just while I'm still here. And I'm going to drop the knockback in here. Okay, so whenever the character hits the enemy, this should return 250. Now I'm going to come into the enemy class, which is a child blueprint of the combat character. And you can see here that when the character walks into the enemy, or vice versa, this event triggers here with the contact box. And I'm actually just going to change this one here to 300, just so we have something different that we can see here. And just to see whether or not things are actually working now that I've closed down the engine and given it some time to think. On the actual combat character, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to set this to 500. So if we come out here and we run our playtest, when we go and we walk into the character, we should see that it returns 300 there. And that is properly returning. And let's see what happens when I swipe the enemy with the sword. You can see that it's returning 250. But I've knocked the enemy off the cliff there, so let's run that in one more time here. 250, 250, 250. So that is after compiling, and I actually forgot to refresh the nodes, which again I don't think is going to be the problem, because if refreshing this node was the issue, then, where are we here? If refreshing this node was the issue, it actually wouldn't work over here. But let's go ahead and we're going to refresh those nodes for God's sake. And we're going to come up here and let's just be extremely explicit. I'll refresh this node too. So we're going to walk over here to the character, or we're going to walk over here to the enemy. I'm going to swipe that guy and we're going to see that it returns 250 after both compiling and refreshing my nodes, and not being dumb either. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about that fourth solution they provided, and that is an overlapping name issue with the built-in function take damage. If I go and I right click here and I type take damage, and spelling take properly is actually a good part of that. Let's go take damage. You can see that it's got this event here for take damage. And if I scroll down here, you can see that the event that they actually have in the engine is on take any damage. And the recommendation to me was to actually try using the name on take damage event. The issue with that, as you could see when I type that in here, take damage, the built-in functionality that they have actually isn't an event. It's an event dispatcher. And the recommended solution to me was to use the naming convention of a different event dispatcher. But I'm not using an event dispatcher here. This is actually just an event. And I can understand a bit of the confusion here, considering they do say that they're struggling with C++ as a full-time developer, so maybe they're more familiar with C++ than blueprints. But yeah, that's just not how blueprints work. We're not getting any errors if the character walks into the enemy or vice versa. We're only getting errors when the character attacks the enemy, which means all of this functionality that's set up here is working totally fine in the child class, the enemy side-scroller, but it's not working in the base combat character where it exists. And that's the whole problem with what's happening here. It's almost like it's exhibiting some sort of macro limitation, where the events are only happening in the child classes and not in the class itself, which is something that just happens when you use something like a macro library. It's not able to run any of the macro logic in the base class. And I'm actually going to showcase that here right now. If I come over to character data where I have this here, I'm just going to go to blueprints and I'm going to create a blueprint macro library. And I'm going to create this with the combat character. ML combat stuff. Why not? And then I'm going to create a new macro here. Test macro 01. And now if I come over here to the combat class and I try to use that, test macro 01, it doesn't show up. But if I come over here to the enemy character and I go test macro, you can see that it appears here totally fine. So I think that has something to do with what this issue is. And that is not great. That means there's some sort of wire crossing with the actual inherent functionality of blueprints in 5.1.1, and something really needs to be done about this.